The fall from the sky. The alien sky shook like it was in pain, clouds splitting open as a burning human transport ship came crashing down. Everyone in the military base stopped what they were doing. The alarms screamed, the ground shook, and even the air tasted like fear. But the officers on duty only stared in horror. The ship was tearing apart in midair. Pieces of metal broke off and rained down like fire. The vessel should have exploded long before reaching the surface. But somehow it refused to die. It kept falling, kept fighting, like something inside it refused to give up. Inside what was left of the cockpit, a human woman named Mira Hale held the broken controls with shaking hands. Sparks hit her face. Smoke burned her lungs. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Half of her screens were dead. The steering column moved with terrible grinding noises. It felt like the ship itself was screaming in her hands. "Hold together," Mira whispered, her voice raw. "Just hold together a little more." Beside her, the co-pilot, an android unit named Juno 7, glitched and rebooted every few seconds, its voice breaking like shattered glass. "Pilot, structural, integrity, 1%, crash, probability, absolute." "I know," Mira muttered, "but we're still alive. And if we're alive, we keep going." The ground rushed up fast, too fast. Mira pulled the controls hard, but the ship barely responded. It hit the ground like a falling mountain, ripping through soil, metal, and stone. It bounced once, rolled, and then skidded so long that sparks followed it like a bright comet tail. When everything finally stopped, Mira sat still, breathing hard. She could hear nothing except the sound of fire dying. For a moment, there was silence. Then something behind her moved. Not metal, not debris, something alive. Mira stood up slowly, ignoring the pain climbing her spine. She turned around and her chest tightened. Cubs, alien predator cubs. Small, trembling, dirty, hurt. Their fur was matted, their eyes wide with fear. They clung to each other and whimpered softly. She counted quickly. 1, 2, 5, 10. More were hiding in the cargo space, shaking, scared, hoping someone would protect them. 21 in total. Mira swallowed hard. She had crossed battlefields. She had survived orbital strikes. But this hit her heart the hardest. She whispered, "It's okay. I got you. I promise you're safe now." One cub, tiny, with silver fur, limped toward her and pressed its head against her leg. The others followed, surrounding her shaky feet. Mira felt something inside her break open. She was exhausted. She was bleeding. Her armor was cracked, dented, half destroyed. But none of that mattered now. "We're going home," she said softly. "I swear it." She lifted the first cub into her arms. The others clung to her legs, climbing, reaching, begging to be carried. She stepped toward the ramp, and the ramp broke open from the crash, falling to the ground with a loud metallic groan. And there, outside, hundreds of aliens waited. Parents, massive, armored, powerful predator species. Warriors known for their claws and strength. For weeks they had mourned the cubs captured by the enemy. They had prayed. They had begged their leaders. They had lost hope. And now a single human walked out of a burning wreck holding all their children. The entire crowd froze. No one spoke. No one breathed. Commander Raxian, leader of the base, stepped forward slowly, his voice trembling for the first time in years. "Human, what did you do? How did you survive?" he asked. Mira did not look at him. She did not bow. She only tightened her hold on the cub in her arms and said, "Not now. I have kids to return." She walked past the soldiers, past the officers, past the stunned commander. All eyes followed her. Every step she took felt heavy, like she was carrying more than just cubs. She was carrying hope. She was carrying something the alien species had believed impossible. Mothers began to approach, all of them towering, terrifying creatures. Their claws were sharp, their fangs deadly. Yet in that moment they looked fragile, broken, afraid to believe their eyes. The first mother stepped forward, 8 feet tall, covered in dark red fur. Her claws shook, her breath hitched, Her eyes were wide, full of terror and hope. Mira stopped in front of her and held out the cub gently. "I think this one is yours," she whispered. The mother stared, then dropped to her knees so hard the ground cracked beneath her weight. Her claws shook as she took her cub back, holding him tightly, crying in a sound no human translator could understand. But Mira understood it anyway. Grief turning into relief, pain turning into love, fear breaking into joy. One by one, mothers behind her slowly fell to their knees too. Not because of fear, not because of power, but because a lone human had returned their children. And Mira Hale stood there breathing heavily, covered in soot, blood, and dust, whispering, "Please stand up. You don't need to kneel for me." But they did, all of them. The entire field kneeled. The air trembled with the sound of alien parents crying. Massive warriors who could rip steel apart now knelt in the dirt like children, holding their returned cubs with shaking claws. Mira stood frozen in the center of them, her armor cracked and bloody, her breath unsteady. She was exhausted, but she refused to sit. Not yet. Not until every cub was safely in the arms of the parent who belonged to them. But as the reunions continued, something else began to spread through the crowd. Fear. Not fear of Mira, but fear for her, because every cub she returned, every parent she approached, every moment she stood there covered in soot and dried blood, it all felt wrong, impossible, unreal. Commander Rakshan finally stepped forward again, this time slower and with deep caution. His mandibles clicked in uncertainty. Even he, a hardened officer who had survived 3 wars, looked shaken. "Human Mira Hale," he said quietly, "I must ask again. How did you find the cubs? Our intelligence placed them in heavily fortified enemy bunker networks. 28 separate sites across hostile territory." Mira's jaw tightened. She didn't want to answer. She truly didn't. So she simply lifted another cub toward a trembling mother and said, "Not now." But Rakshan didn't back away this time. He lowered his voice. "Please, you owe us this answer. How did you bring them all back alive?" Before Mira could speak, a deep metallic groan echoed from the wreck behind them. Everyone turned. Out of the broken transport stumbled Juno 7, the android. Sparks crackled across its chest. Hydraulic fluid dripped from its leg. Its eyes glowed faintly as it limped forward. "Records indicate," Juno 7 said in a glitching voice, "that the pilot, Mira Hale, did not locate the cubs." The entire crowd reacted at once. Gasps, claws tightening, ears rising. Raxion stepped closer. "If she didn't find them, who did?" Mira closed her eyes for one short moment. She knew this question was coming. She had prayed it wouldn't. Juno 7 looked straight at the commander. "They found her." Silence detonated like a shockwave. Even the cubs stopped whimpering. Rakshan stared. "Explain." Juno 7's voice glitched again. "Pilot Hale was dispatched for supply retrieval. The destination was not the enemy grid. Instead, the cubs appeared. They came to her. One by one," Mira finally spoke, her voice tired but steady. "They ran into me," she said softly. "I didn't break into bunkers. I didn't storm enemy bases. I didn't fight armies." The parents stared at her with wide, confused eyes. She looked at the cubs, their small bodies pressed against their mothers, trembling. "They came to me," Mira repeated. "They ran out of the dark. They found my position," one mother whispered. "How could they escape their prisons?" Another father murmured, "The bunkers were sealed. The enemy guards were elite. This is not possible." And then, from the far side of the crowd, a frightened voice rose. "Unless the enemy wanted them to escape." A chill spread through every warrior present. Rakshan's pupils narrowed to slits. "Human, Mira, when they found you, were the cubs chased?" Mira hesitated, her jaw clenched, her eyes lowered. And that silence alone was enough. The parents stiffened. The soldiers gripped their weapons. The air tasted like fear and metal. Rakshan stepped forward again, but this time with urgency. "Tell us, were they being hunted?" he demanded. Mira sighed slowly. Her shoulders shook, not from fear but from exhaustion. "They weren't running to me," she said quietly. They were running from something. One mother sobbed and held her child tighter. A father growled low, claws sliding from his fingers. What? Raxian whispered. What were they running from? Mira finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, haunted, and full of something even stronger. Pain. We were attacked before we reached the first bunker, she said. Something in the dark, something fast, something that didn't act like soldiers or guards. Raxian stiffened. Describe it. Mira shook her head. I didn't see it, not clearly, but I saw its shadow, and I heard the cubs scream. The silence broke. Parents began whispering in panic. Soldiers looked at one another with horror. This was not what they expected. They thought the cubs had been saved from structured enemy forces. But this was something else. Something worse. Something unknown. Whatever chased them, Mira continued, it wasn't after me. It was only after them. I was just in the way. Raxian's face hardened. And you fought it? Mira nodded weakly. I did what I could. And then we ran. They kept coming. They followed us for days, Juno 7 added. Enemy bunkers were found destroyed, but not by human weapons. Every alien present froze. Mira whispered. And when we finally reached the transport, they were still coming. Raxian took a long breath, his body shaking. Human, you did not save our cubs from the enemy, he said quietly. He leaned closer. You saved them from something else. Mira didn't answer. She didn't have to. The terror in her eyes said everything. A new threat was out there. A threat that wanted only one thing. The cubs, and no one knew why. But Raxian knew this. If something hunted their young. The thing in the dark night fell heavy over the alien base. The fires from the crashed transport hissed quietly in the cold air, and soldiers stood in tight circles, whispering in fear about what Mira had said. The cubs were safe for now, sleeping in their parents' arms. But peace in the base felt like a thin sheet of glass, ready to break at the slightest touch. Commander Raxian led Mira and the android Juno 7 into a secure command tent. The walls shook slightly from the cold wind. Every officer inside looked tense, their claws tapping nervously against metal tables. Raxian did not sit. Neither did Mira. The question everyone feared came out of his mouth at last. Human Mira, he said, voice tight. What was chasing the cubs? Mira rubbed her face tiredly, leaving streaks of soot across her skin. I told you, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't soldiers. It wasn't enemy troops. It was something else. Raxian slammed a clawed hand against the table. That is not enough. You brought 21 cubs back alive from 28 destroyed bunkers, and not destroyed by any weapon we recognize. If we are facing something new, we must know. Juno 7's eyes flickered as it projected holographic images recovered from its damaged sensors. The room darkened. The hologram showed a bunker with walls melted inward like wax. Metal twisted into shapes that looked like claws had pulled the walls apart. Doors torn from the inside, and huge scratch marks across the floor. The officers leaned closer, horrified. General Valcor whispered, This was not done by any species we know. Mira pointed at the scratch marks. That's the first bunker we reached. Raxian frowned. Then where were the cubs? Mira's voice dropped. Hiding, behind destroyed walls, under broken metal, curling into each other. Crying, one officer asked. Were the enemy soldiers guarding them dead? Mira hesitated, then shook her head. No, they were gone. Gone? Raxian repeated. Gone, Mira said. No bodies, no blood, just missing. A cold dread settled in the room. Then General Valcor spoke again. Show the next one. Juno 7 switched to the next hologram. This one was worse. The bunker wasn't melted. It was hollow. A giant pit. Walls crushed inward. Floor split open, almost like something had come up from below. The officers stepped back from the image. Raxian whispered, This is impossible. Nothing could dig through our bunker foundations. Something did, Mira replied softly. The android projected the final recording. This one was the worst. The hologram showed Mira standing at a cave entrance. The cubs were huddled behind her. The ground shook. Dust fell from the walls. A deep growl echoed from the black tunnel. Rakshin's body stiffened. "What is that sound?" he asked. Mira closed her eyes. "The thing that chased us." The video glitched as the creature lunged. Only a dark, fast blur could be seen. Something with too many limbs, too much speed, and eyes that glowed like cold stars. The cubs screamed. The recording cut out. The command tent went silent, terrifyingly silent. Raxian stared at Mira. "Why would something hunt only the cubs? Why not attack you?" Mira's hands tightened. "I don't know. But when we escaped, it didn't follow me. It followed them." "Meaning," Valcor said slowly, "it wanted the young." Officers exchanged horrified looks. Nothing in their galaxy targeted young ones exclusively. Nothing hunted children with purpose. Rakshin began pacing. "We must assume this creature, whatever it is still out there." Juno 7's eyes glowed red. "Correction, creatures. Scans detected multiple heat sources underground." Rakshin burst out. "How many?" Juno 7 calculated. "At least 12. Possibly more." Mira felt her stomach twist. 12. But one was that fast? She whispered. Rakshin gripped the table so hard the metal bent under his claws. "If they come for the cubs again—" "They won't," Mira said suddenly, surprising everyone. Rakshin turned sharply. "How can you be sure?" Mira stepped forward, her voice cold, steady, certain. "Because they weren't just chasing the cubs." The officers held their breath. "They were tracking something," she continued. "Something the cubs were carrying." "What do you mean?" Valcor asked. Mira reached into her belt pouch and pulled out a small, cracked device. Black stone-like material with glowing red symbols. Rakshin's eyes widened. "Is that—" "Yes," Mira said. One of the cubs had it tied around its neck. Officers recoiled like she had pulled out a live bomb. "That symbol," Valcor whispered, stepping back. "That is ancient, forbidden, lost for thousands of years." Rakshin felt a cold truth rising in his chest. "Are you saying," he whispered, "that the enemy did not capture the cubs?" Mira nodded slowly. "They were collecting them." "Why?" Mira held up the device. "For this?" The tent went dead quiet as everyone realized the truth. The cubs weren't just prisoners, they were bait, and whatever hunted them wanted what they carried. Rakshin exhaled shakily. "We must protect the cubs immediately. Put the base on full alert." Before he finished, the ground under the tent rumbled violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Officers stumbled. Juno 7 shouted, "Seismic activity detected. Origin, underground. Rapid approach." Raxion froze. Mira felt her blood turn to ice. The creatures had found them, and they were coming. Tonight, when the ground opened, the rumbling did not stop. It grew louder, deeper, heavier, like something enormous was clawing through the earth straight toward the base. Soldiers sprinted outside. Mothers tightened their hold on their cubs. The night sky flickered with emergency lights. Commander Raxion shouted, "Barricade the perimeter! Form defense lines! Move! Move!" But Mira didn't move. She stood still, eyes narrowed, because she recognized the rhythm of that rumbling. She had heard it before, deep underground, in the darkness of a bunker where the walls melted and the floors cracked. The creature was close, too close. Juno 7 scanned the ground with shaking sensors. Warning, multiple subterranean entities approaching at high speed. Estimated surface breach, 40 seconds. Soldiers stumbled back, gripping their weapons tighter. The parents huddled around their cubs. The cubs cried out, sensing danger. And Mira stepped forward. Rakshin grabbed her arm. "Human, are you insane? Get behind the defense line." Mira shook her head. "If they're coming for something the cubs carried, they'll come straight through any barricade." Rakshin's eyes widened. "You mean we cannot stop them?" Mira's voice was calm. Too calm. "You can slow them. You can fight them. But you can't keep them away." Her hand tightened around the black device she had found tied around a cub's neck. "They're tracking this," she whispered. Suddenly the rumbling stopped. Everything became silent, so silent that even the wind froze. Juno 7's mechanical voice cracked. Surface breach in 3, 2, 1. The ground exploded. Not cracked, not opened, exploded. Dirt and stone blasted into the air as something massive burst out beneath the command tent. Soldiers were thrown like toys. Weapons flew. Tents collapsed. And then, the creature crawled out. Not one. 3. They were enormous, twice the size of a war beast. Their bodies were long and twisted, covered in pale armored plates like stone. Their limbs were sharp, jointed backward, moving in unnatural angles. Their eyes glowed with cold silver light that pierced the darkness. The parents gasped in horror. Soldiers froze. These were not animals. They were nightmares. Rakshan whispered, "Ancient devourers," his voice breaking. "They're real." Mira did not take her eyes off the creatures. "So you know them." Rakshan slowly stepped back. "Old legends, stories told to frighten hatchlings, beasts that hunted our ancestors before we built cities. Creatures drawn to the scent of royal blood," Mira stiffened. "Royal blood," Rakshan pointed at the cubs. "Not all the captured cubs belonged to normal families. Some were descendants of the High Claw line. The royal family disappeared generations ago. Their blood was said to attract these monsters," Mira's mind raced. "Royal blood, ancient beasts, a device around a cub's neck. And the creatures coming straight for her." One beast screeched, a sharp metallic sound that made her ears ring. Its silver eyes locked onto Mira's hand, onto the device, onto the reason they came. And then it lunged, so fast the soldiers didn't even aim. So fast Rakshan didn't have time to shout. So fast Mira couldn't think. But she did not run. She held her ground. At the last moment she jumped sideways, rolled, and the creature crashed into a steel tower, bending it like paper. Mira scrambled to her feet. The second beast charged next, claws slicing the air. Soldiers fired plasma rifles, but the shots bounced off its armored plates. Juno 7 shouted, "Their armor is absorbing energy. Switch to kinetic weapons." But it was already too late. The third beast dove underground, disappearing in a flash of dirt and stone. Rakshan shouted, "It's going for the cubs!" The alien mothers roared and formed a circle, shielding their children with their bodies. The cubs whimpered, clutching their parents' fur. Mira sprinted toward them, dodging falling debris. "Hold your ground! Don't break the circle!" A massive claw burst out of the earth inside the circle. Mothers screamed. Mira lunged forward, grabbing the closest cub and pulling him out of the way just as the creature erupted again, ready to snatch another youngling. But this time, Mira shouted at the top of her lungs, "Stop!" The creature froze mid-strike. The entire battlefield went still. Even the wind stopped moving. The beast slowly turned its head toward Mira, its cold eyes fixed on the device in her hand. Then something unexpected happened. Its silver eyes dimmed. Its massive body trembled, and the monster bowed. The soldiers gasped. Rakshan staggered back. The parents stared in disbelief. The devourer bowed. To a human. Mira swallowed, her heart pounding. "It's not bowing to me," she whispered. "It's bowing to this." She held up the glowing device. The symbols pulsed with blue light now, brighter than before. Rakshan stared, fear and realization in his voice. "That device, it's a royal seal, one used only by the ruling bloodline of our species thousands of years ago. Whoever wears it commands the devourers." Mira's eyes widened. "Then why were they chasing the cubs?" she asked. Rakshan answered with a trembling voice. "Because one of the cubs," he whispered, "is the last heir of our royal family." Mira looked back at the cubs, trembling, innocent, unaware of their own bloodline. The devourers bowed again, but for how long? Because when Mira looked closer, she realized something terrifying. The devourers were not bowing forever. They were waiting for a command. And if Mira didn't figure out what the seal wanted, the next attack would be worse. Much, much worse. The last heir. The battlefield was frozen in a terrifying stillness. The devourers, massive creatures of living stone and ancient hunger, bowed before Mira, not for loyalty, not for respect, but for the royal seal glowing in her hand. Soldiers stared in disbelief. Parents held their cubs tightly, too afraid to even breathe. The ground still trembled with the weight of the creatures. Mira took a slow step back, her heart pounding. Raxion, I don't know what to do. Raxion's mandibles twitched nervously. Human, listen carefully. If one of the cubs is truly the lost heir, then the devourers are bound by ancient law. They obey the royal bloodline. Mira frowned. Then why did they attack the bunkers? Raxion shook his head. They weren't attacking. They were seeking. These creatures protect the heir. They are guardians, dangerous ones, and they destroy anything between them and the royal child. A whisper ran through the parents, a mixture of fear and relief, but Mira wasn't convinced. They chased the cubs, she said. They terrified them. They tore through bunkers. They hunted them, Raxion answered slowly. If the heir was in danger, the devourers would kill everything until they reached them. Even the cubs? Mira asked sharply. Raxion hesitated, a hesitation long enough for the truth to hurt. Mira stepped closer, lowering her voice. These creatures weren't saving the cubs. They were clearing the path. They didn't care who survived, Raxion's eyes widened. Then they are broken, following instinct, not order. Juno 7's robotic voice crackled. Correction. The royal seal was damaged. If the device is unstable, it may send incorrect signals. Mira looked down at the cracked device in her hand. The glowing blue symbols flickered like a dying heart. Great, she muttered. So they're following a broken order? Juno 7 nodded. Yes, they are seeking the heir violently. The devourer closest to Mira lifted its head slightly. Its silver eyes locked onto her again. Not the device. Her. Mira froze. Raxion whispered. It's choosing you as the carrier, because you hold the seal. Oh, wonderful, Mira said dryly. I really needed more responsibility today, one of the cubs whimpered behind her. Mira turned to see the smallest cub, the silver-furred one, peeking out from his mother's arms, shaking, eyes wide. He's the heir, Mira said softly. Isn't he? The mother holding him trembled. I don't know. My blood is common. My family never belonged to royalty. Raxion stepped closer, examining the cub with careful eyes. No, he whispered. Look at him. Silver fur. Only royal blood carries that color. The mother gasped and held her child even tighter. Tears fell from her eyes. My cub? Royal? That is impossible. Mira knelt beside them. Did he have anything with him when I found him? The mother shook her head. Only that device. I thought it was something the enemy forced him to wear. Mira looked at the cub, small, fragile, unaware of the war around him. I don't think the enemy captured him, she said softly. I think they found him and used him to lure the devourers away from their strongholds. Raxion stiffened. You mean the enemy wanted the devourers to attack our bunkers? Mira nodded. Every bunker destroyed, every soldier gone, all devoured. It wasn't the enemy's strategy. It was bait, parents whispered in horror. Valcor growled. That means the enemy knows the heir exists. Mira met his eyes. Not just knows. They are trying to kill him. Raxion's face hardened. If the royal line ends, our species falls into chaos. Juno 7 suddenly interrupted. Warning. Devourers moving again. Scans show increasing aggression. The creatures were rising from their booing position, slowly, heads lifting, eyes refocusing. The blue symbol on the seal flickered faster. Mira whispered, They're reacting to the seal. Raxion shouted, Human, drop it! Mira shook her head. If I drop it, they'll grab it, or the cub. The second devourer took a step forward, claws sinking into the soil like knives. The third one growled, shaking the entire field. Parents screamed and backed away, forming a protective wall around the cubs. Soldiers raised weapons again. The creatures were no longer bowing. They were choosing, and Mira knew what they were choosing. Raxion, she whispered, they think I'm the seal bearer. They think I'm responsible for the heir. Raxion stepped back in fear. Then they will force you to lead them, Mira swallowed hard. I can't lead them. I don't even know how they think. Juno 7's voice vibrated. They follow movement patterns based on bloodline proximity. The seal is calling the heir. They are expecting you to bring him forward. Mira froze. And if I don't? She asked quietly. The ground shook again. The devourers roared as one. Rakshan's voice turned to a whisper of despair. Then they will tear this entire base apart until you do. Mira looked at the silver-furred cub, frightened, tiny, trembling. She took a deep breath. Then I guess, she said, standing tall, I'm taking responsibility. Rakshan stepped forward urgently. Human, what are you doing? Mira lifted the seal. The cub's mother clutched her child. The devourers froze, eyes locked on Mira. She whispered, Bring me the air. Gas filled the air. The mother shook. No, you cannot. Mira met her eyes gently. I will not hurt him. But if I don't hold him, we all die. The mother hesitated, crying, then slowly placed the cub into Mira's arms. The devourers lowered their heads instantly. And then the ground rumbled again. But this time, it wasn't the devourers. Juno 7's voice cracked in terror. Warning! Massive signature approaching, far larger than any recorded entity. Prepare for impact. Something worse was coming. Something ancient. Something the devourers feared. And it was coming straight for the air. The Ancient One. The ground vibrated like a heartbeat made of thunder. Not a rumble, not a tremor, a pulse. Deep, heavy, slow. Even the devourers froze. Juno 7's voice cracked with static. Warning! Unknown entity rising from beneath. Size estimate. Catastrophic. Rakshan stepped back, his mandibles trembling. This cannot be. The ancient records said the Ancient One was a myth. Mira held the tiny silver-furred cub against her chest, her fingers tightening protectively. What is the Ancient One? Rakshan swallowed hard. The ruler of the Devourers, a creature older than our history, the guardian of the true royal heir, the one that commands all the packs. And it's coming here? Mira asked. Rakshan nodded slowly. Because you hold the air. And the seal. The cub whimpered softly, clutching Mira's armor with tiny claws. Parents in the background cried, terrified. Soldiers formed ranks even though they knew it wouldn't help. The devourers lowered themselves to the ground, trembling. The earth burst open. A massive shape rose from the deep darkness below. Larger than the command center. Larger than the transport ship. Larger than anything Mira had ever seen. Its body was covered in ancient stone armor, glowing with lines of silver fire. Its limbs were thick and powerful, like the trunks of dead worlds. Its head was massive, crowned with jagged bone spikes, and its eyes were galaxies, not glowing, burning, two swirling orbs of silver light that looked into Mira's soul. Rakshan collapsed to his knees. The Ancient One, the first guardian, still lives, he whispered. The beast exhaled a deep rumble. The devourers bowed low, trembling. But Mira stood her ground. Her heart pounded so hard she felt it in her teeth, but she did not move, because the cub in her arms lifted its head and squeaked. The Ancient One lowered its massive skull, inch by inch, until its face was only meters from Mira. Its breath shook the wind. Its eyes glowed. Mira whispered, I know you came for him. The monster's silver eyes focused on the cub. The cub reached out a tiny paw. The Ancient One rumbled so deeply the stars trembled. Juno 7 analyzed the sound. Translation, uncertain, but emotional resonance indicates respect. Rakshan's eyes widened. It recognizes him. The air, a heavy silence fell. Then the Ancient One shifted its gaze to Mira. The entire army tensed. Rakshan shouted, Human, don't move! But Mira didn't listen. She stepped forward. Every alien screamed in panic. The devourers hissed. The earth cracked. And Mira held up the cub and the glowing seal. I brought him back, she said quietly. Alive. Safe. I protected him. Even when I didn't understand why. The Ancient One's massive head tilted, ancient intelligence swirling in its eyes. Mira continued. If you want him, you take him gently. Because if you harm him, she swallowed. Her voice softened. I will fight you, even if you break me. Every alien stared at her in shock. A human, threatening a creature older than their civilization. The Ancient One lowered its head further. The ground quaked. Then, it bowed. To Mira. A wave of shock swept the field. Raction staggered. Parents gasped. Soldiers dropped their weapons. The Ancient One had bowed to a human. Juno 7's eyes flashed. Conclusion, it recognizes the protector of the air. You, Mira Hale. The Ancient One's giant claw reached forward, slow and gentle. Mira hesitated, but the cub leaped from her arms with a chirp and landed softly on the Ancient One's armored forepaw. The Ancient One curled its massive claws around the cub protectively, lifting him with impossible tenderness for a creature of its size. Parents wept. Soldiers knelt. Rakshan bowed his head in disbelief. Mira exhaled with shaky relief. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now. All of you." The Ancient One turned to the other Devourers and released a roar. Not a battle cry, but a command. The Devourers bowed again. Then one by one, they retreated beneath the earth, leaving the Ancient One above the ground for a moment longer. It looked at Mira. A soft rumble vibrated through the ground. Juno 7 translated faintly. "Message, gratitude?" Mira smiled tiredly. "You're welcome." Then the Ancient One sank back into the ground, with the cub in its arms, leaving a deep crater, but no destruction. Silence settled. True silence. For the first time in weeks, there was peace. Rakshan approached Mira slowly. "Human, there is no honor in our history greater than what you have done. You saved the air. You stopped the Devourers. You reunited families." Mira shook her head. "No, I did what anyone should do. Protect the innocent." Rakshan's voice dropped to a near whisper. "But only a human did." Parents stepped forward, kneeling before Mira, not in fear but in deep respect, bowing their heads to the woman who walked through darkness, carrying their future. Mira stepped back awkwardly. "Please, please stand. No one needs to kneel." But they did anyway, not because they had to, but because she earned it. And for the first time in a long time, Mira Hale felt something warm in her chest. She was not a soldier. She was not a hero. She was a protector. And that was enough. The night sky brightened as dawn broke over the mountains. A new day, a new peace, a new legend. The human who returned every lost cub, and the mothers who kneeled before her.